hands-on. Okay, well, it's not safe to go hands-on, okay? We give you tools. You have a baton, you have a taser, you got OC, beanbags, 40 mic. What do you have? What are the tools that you have for you? Start considering those, because our job is controlling the actions and the resistance of a suspect. Our job is not to go out and kill everybody or have a plan to kill everybody that we meet. That is the difference between the guardian mindset. Our job is to guard people. We're not warriors. We're not an invasive party.
Like, ignore it, kind of like, our, Roomba cleans your house. How likely would it be to adopt this into your household? Movie. It makes it more human, right? Makes it a little more personable. You don't feel like there's a robot? What are your thoughts on that, Chelsea? When you hear your toe, maybe, on the wall, or a coffee table, you don't react, but...
I show that just because that's absolutely fucking hilarious. So, I would love to have a video like that. Alright, guys, when you go through a critical incident, such as an officer-involved shooting, any kind of lethal force encounter, somebody's deploying it against you or vice versa, it's a watershed moment in your career. That is a very significant moment for you. And it's going to change your perception, it's going to change how you view things, it's going to change how you address matters. I can tell, I think most anybody who's ever been in OIS, your first call for service that you actually respond to, you're going to handle it a little bit differently. Those problems that you saw before, that you didn't acknowledge or didn't see before start to arise and you start to recognize that. So use the geology analogy on this one. Coal, right? Coal is just carbon. Burnt wood, basically, right? What happens when you take pressure and heat and do that to coal? What happens?
Diamond.
Make a diamond, right? That diamond look pretty?
Not yet.
No. Yeah, you put somebody through absolute hell, through a critical incident, whatever those circumstances might be, you may create a diamond through that pressure and heat. But that diamond doesn't have value. It doesn't have anything until we do something to recognize that value. You have to be able to recognize the good and the bad that comes from these incidents and find your value. When I talked about growth and coping mechanisms, I talked about dark humor. When I say growth, your value, finding what's valuable, what things that you can take away from those experiences that can make yourself a better person, that can make the people around you better people. Otherwise, what happens? To me, I think you lose yourself. You lose your personality because you allow those demons and those things to begin to consume you. You don't become the person. You don't become that diamond that everybody recognizes and sees the value in.
He opened the screen door and started pounding on the door, so I didn't answer it and I called my mom. And she said to get the gun and go hide in the closet.
Okay, I have a deputy around. I want you to stay on the phone with me, okay?
Knowing her daughter was in danger, Deborah St. Clair raced home from work.
I drove home at a really fast pace to try to get to her, and when I got here, the police were already here. And they had the suspect.
That's because St. Clair's daughter shot the intruder as he made his way through the house.
When I saw the door handle turn, I shot him. I guess it went through the door and went down him and went to the wall.
The bullet hit the intruder and he took off.
Girls
He made
OG.
a short ways down the road.
He was sitting down, the policeman had him apprehended at the end of the block, and all I saw was some.
When you look at that little girl, what do we see? That girl's badass, right? She took care of business, and you know mom was proud, right? Let's look at cops who've been involved in shit like that the same way. Like seriously, they handle business, they took care of shit. We get some agencies where they look like a cop killed somebody or shot somebody like this shit versus somebody like this, right? Look at what their purpose, their basis was. Ted Bundy killed for simply his psychosis, his pleasure, these sort of things. Chris Kyle killed for an actual purpose. That was for him and for the people that he cared about. That's why he did that. His goal, he didn't want to grow up being a killer, but sure as shit he did that because of the fact that people mattered to him. These are the people that matter to me. Christopher Ryan Walsh, and to watch March 16, 2020. That was one of my coworkers. On March 15, 2020, a roving active shooter went through and rained absolute hell on Springfield. He went into a come and go, and he went into there intent on killing anybody he encountered. One of those people he shot was a trash truck driver who was standing out in front of the store right here. Officer Walsh and Officer Overton, academy classmate and good friend of mine, both responded to that, not realizing that the shooter was still inside the store. Dispatch had the comments that shots were still being actively fired, but they both responded to that location. They tried to render aim to that trash truck driver. When they did that, the trash truck driver, as they're rendering aim to them in the front, those stores have very good audio. They have exceptional video as well too. As they were rendering aid to him, the guy was drinking an iced tea in the back of the store. He saw Officer Walsh and Officer Overton, set the iced tea down, and he said, "No cover, this will be easy." And he walked up to the store and he opened fire on him with an AK-47 in almost point blank range. Officer Walsh was struck twice in the chest. Officer Overton was struck 3 times. One of the rounds that would have been fatal with him actually was stopped by his vest. Officer Walsh took his last breaths on scene. Officer Overton went to the hospital and is still now working in Springfield on patrol. When I talk about these two men, I talk about them as heroes. That is absolutely hands down what they are. They went to a scene not knowing what they were getting into, and they tried to take care of business, just as like many of these other officers that have gone through these instances have. But the reality of it was they made mistakes. Officer Overton will absolutely tell you that he made mistakes that night. The problem was we refuse to this day to ever do a debrief. Springfield does, or ever acknowledge the mistakes that were made that night. If you want to talk about absolute fury and absolute anger and absolute rage, never honoring these people's memory and understanding how can we do better? How can we go through those circumstances, that incident, and how can we do this again? How can we do this again so that we're not looking at this many people on a board? So that when my coworkers, I didn't have to stand there and watch them get buried. There's a better way of doing it. That growth starts with recognizing how we can get better. That night, the night that I came back to work, my son looked at my badge. He saw the black band on my badge. It was about 2 nights after Chris was killed. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "Daddy, what is that on your badge?" I didn't have words for him to explain what had happened. That Chris did not come home to his wife. He did not come home to his daughter. And I look back at that now and I wonder, for what? What can we take from such an awful tragedy? What can we take from such an event like that and actually get value from it? Learn from it. Take something from it so then we don't